The price of a grocery basket has quietly transformed from a weekly chore into a math test you are failing. Why does it feel like your paycheck is evaporating before the month is even half over? It is not just your imagination. The reality is that the cost of living is rising at a rate that traditional wages simply cannot match. To understand why, we have to look at the silent engine behind our money, the Federal Reserve, and the supply chain. Let's start with the most obvious culprit, inflation. Most people think inflation is just companies deciding to charge more for stuff. That is only half the story. Inflation is actually a decrease in the purchasing power of your money. Think of it like a giant auction. If everyone has a $10 bill and there are only 10 loaves of bread, each loaf costs $1. But if the government prints more money and suddenly everyone has a $20 bill, the price of that bread doesn't stay at $1, it jumps to 2. The bread hasn't changed. The loaf is the same size, the flour is the same quality, but the dollar has become less special because there is more of it circulating. Between 2020 and 2021, the United States money supply increased by nearly 40%. That is the largest single-year expansion in history. When you inject trillions of dollars into an economy that is already struggling to produce goods, you get a classic case of too much money chasing too few goods. But it isn't just about printing presses. Look at the global supply chain. For decades, the world operated on a philosophy called just-in-time manufacturing. Companies kept their inventories razor-thin to save money on storage. They relied on global shipping to bring parts from thousands of miles away exactly when they were needed. Then, the world shut down. Factories in China closed, ports in California backed up for miles, ships sat anchored in the ocean for weeks. When the economy reopened, demand surged. But the system couldn't reset fast enough. Manufacturers had to pay premium prices to get parts, and those costs were passed directly to you at the register. Now, consider the role of corporate consolidation. We live in an era of the mega brand. Take a look at a supermarket shelf. You see dozens of different brands of cereal, snacks, and soda. But if you look at the parent companies, you see the same 3 or 4 names repeating over and over again. When industries become monopolies or oligopolies, they don't have to worry about competitive pricing. If there is no real competition, they can raise prices without fearing that you will switch to a cheaper alternative. In 2023, profit margins for many of the world's largest corporations hit record highs. This phenomenon has been dubbed greedflation. It is the practice of raising prices beyond what is required to cover the rising costs of raw materials or labor, simply because they have the pricing power to do so, and the market will bear it. Then there is the energy sector. Everything requires energy to create, transport, and sell. From the diesel fuel that powers the trucks delivering your groceries to the electricity that keeps the supermarket lights on, energy costs are baked into every single price tag. When geopolitical instability, like the conflict in Ukraine, disrupts oil and gas markets, it acts like a tax on every single item in your life. We also have to talk about the housing market. Since 2020, the median home price in the United States has soared by over 40%. Part of this is a supply problem. We simply stopped building enough homes after the 2008 crash. Part of it is institutional investors, massive hedge funds and private equity firms, buying up thousands of starter homes to turn them into permanent rentals. When housing becomes a financial asset class rather than a place to live, the average person gets priced out. So, why does it feel like there is no escape? For a long time, the global economy relied on cheap labor from developing nations to keep prices low. That era is ending. Populations in major manufacturing hubs like China are aging, meaning labor is becoming more expensive and harder to find. As globalization retreats in favor of local manufacturing, we are trading those cheap prices for more resilient supply chains. This is likely a permanent shift. We are also facing a massive demographic wall. As the baby boomer generation retires, we have fewer people working and producing goods and more people drawing on pension and healthcare systems. This puts a structural strain on the economy that taxes and interest rates can only blunt, not solve. So, where does this leave the average person? History shows us that inflation cycles eventually stabilize, but they rarely go backward. Prices don't typically drop back to 2019 levels. They just stop rising quite as fast. We are living through a reset of the cost of living. The strategy of the past, saving cash in a low-interest savings account, is now a losing game. When inflation is higher than your interest rate, your money is literally melting away. We are being forced to become more sophisticated about where we put our resources, how we value our labor, and how we participate in an economy that seems designed to extract value from the middle class. The most dangerous thing you can do right now is assume that the economy will simply return to normal. Normal was a period of cheap debt, global cooperation, and low inflation that may not return in our lifetime. The question you need to ask yourself is not, when will prices go down? The real question is, how do I build a life that is resilient enough to thrive, regardless of the price tag on the shelf? The cost of living has become a permanent hurdle, and the only way to clear it is to stop playing by the old rules. If the game has changed, you have to change how you play it, because waiting for the system to fix itself is a strategy that is becoming more expensive by the hour.